This episode of T-Rex Talk is going to be about AI. Now, this is theoretically a gun-related podcast, which is not about AI. You don't care about AI, but AI cares about you. Welcome back to another episode of T-Rex Talk, and this episode is going to be about AI. I have to say this over and over again so the training models get a feeling for my voice and my character so it can make future episodes of AI content for you to consume. That's probably what's going to happen. But I have a guest today who is a real human being, not an AI. It is Noah Botkin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Isaac.
So you've been on the podcast before, but not talking about your main area of expertise. You run the T-Rex ARMS software development team, and I don't think we've actually talked about software or computers or AI on the podcast before. So I
feel like I should add a disclaimer that AI is not my area of expertise.
Yeah, you don't use AI quite as much in your job as just raw human intellect at this point.
Yeah, that's true. The intellect, the human spun brains are still winning right now at T-Rex.
I saw a great tweet that I should have sent to you. Somebody said, I used Claude to refactor all of my code and it was a thing of beauty. It was elegant. It was perfect. It was readable and it totally didn't work.
That actually has not been my experience having AI. I've done my share of vibe coding where you don't read the code and you just like hit tab until it works.
It is not elegant. It does not look good.
Yeah, it has a pretty low ceiling of like how many lines it can write until things stop working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've been watching AI for a while. You're not an expert user of AI, but you have experimented in your different field. We do use a couple of AI tools on the podcast. We use Midjourney to generate thumbnails on occasion, most of the time, and we use some of the AI audio cleaning tools for some of the way you do a remote podcast and they don't have the fancy microphones, and the AI tools do a pretty good job of cleaning up bad audio. So there are areas where it's getting really good. And part of the reason we're talking about it this week is Google has a new video generator, which is surprisingly good. I saw a couple of clips that did not fool me.
Absurdly good.
But I was very close to being fooled by the emotional support Kangaroo. That looked really, really good. So, what are your thoughts on the VO3 milestone?
It's really good. It's astonishingly good at like doing voice, matching the voice to the human, doing like keeping track of different characters and then
the lip sync
giving them
solid.
The correct voice. This one's Puerto Rican, this one's Italian, like they sound different.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
Yeah.
People have been, this is not really a hot take. People have been saying this a lot. I don't think AI is actually going to greatly contribute to the misinformation crisis or whatever it is you want to call it.
Because people are already so dumb, right?
Yeah, and lying has always been really easy to do. Lying has always been easy. And this makes it like slightly, marginally easier, but like not that much easier. So
interesting, yeah.
Yeah. I think what's really sad is if you look over any boomer's shoulder and look at their Facebook page, how much of it is AI, and like not even good AI, not like the good AI models that are happening. It's like 2-year-old AI.
A lot of people have talked about like any day now AI is going to get good enough to fool people. It has fooled people from the beginning, so that is kind of a thing.
This is not new. Slightly off topic, but rewinding. Have you used Midjourney object references at all?
No.
Like putting yourself in and okay.
No, that's on.
You should play with that.
That's on a to-do list. I had an idea to do that with
really good.
with firearms. Try to train it to recognize or duplicate certain specific firearms and maintain cohesion across images. But we never actually got around to that. Ryan was too busy and I was too lazy, and that was not a good combination for a to-do list.
Nice. I'm planning to play with that next week for a children's book, actually.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I think that could be kind of fun.
Yeah, so figuring out how to use AI tools where you're actually still in control is very interesting. People are already being fooled by AI. So are you worried? You mentioned you're not as worried about the misinformation crisis as some people are, because
It's already here.
Misinformation predates most societies, and lying is super easy. But is there an extra level of confusion when everything that you see is fake on your social media stream?
I think it depends on what people want to see. So I think what the Facebook experiment has shown us is that the people on Facebook don't really care about truth. And so
this is a fantastic new slogan for Zuckerberg.
Right. And so like AI is perfect for them. It's going to let them live in like the little weird, shiny AI, Thomas Kincaid AI world that they would rather live in. I think that's pretty true
that
for.
I hate Thomas Kincaid with passion, and you brought him up on purpose.
Yes, we all hate him here. Also, AI looks like very Kincaid-ian with the fake lighting.
Actually, that is a fantastic point.
Yeah.
And I wonder if AI models have been trained to lean this way, because they're trained on human data, but then they also are sort of leaned in a certain direction by their guiders, the ones that are guided. I wonder if that has made them try to give humans what they want, and that's why it gets sort of Kincaid-ish.
I think it leaned that way for the same reason Thomas Kincaid leaned that way.
It's what people want.
Well, yes, but also, I wish I knew more about diffusion models, but until recently, basically everything has been diffusion models. Mm-hmm. And diffusion models, the way I understand them, they care more about like optimizing for something that looks good locally instead of something that looks good globally.
Oh, yes.
So, and Thomas Kincaid would do that with like his lighting. Like, there's like, what's going on with lighting? There's like 6 different lighting sources, and there's 2 different suns. Like, what's going on? And like, it looks good in this segment of the picture.
If you look at the right wall of the house, it's beautifully moonlit. And if you look at the left wall of the house, it is also beautifully moonlit from the other moon.
And so Kincaid was doing this like crazy over-optimizing of like local aesthetics, which I think is exactly what diffusion models do, but it's not globally coherent.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually sort of the problem with basically all AI right now is global coherence is not great.
It's one of these things that it's not hard to fix if you want to make certain AIs look better. Like when I look at AI images, one of the giveaways is everything is too in focus, or the background is too nicely bokeh'd out of focus. The lighting is too good. The exposure is too good. Yeah. At no point does the AI say those windows are too bright to be picked up, and so they should be clipping out. There's locally everything looks too good, and globally it fails the smell test.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of this problem we created, because stock photography has been a thing for a long time, and everyone's complained at how bad and fake it looks, and AI photos are like largely trained on stock photography, so we easily created this monster.
So that's why AI images look kind of bad right now. But again, it's a really easy fix. It's easy to use Photoshop to
and just prompt decently.
And train models better on more grungy stuff. But what happens when you live in a world full of nothing but AI slop? If you are a Facebook user, you prefer it because you like Thomas Kincaid, and that's your feed is better. What if you're a person who wants real life? Then what do?
Does anyone really want real life?
You go to X, where people just fight with each other. What could be more real life than that? What happens if you are actually a seeker of truth and you're not just wanting to doom scroll and entertain yourself? What if you're actually looking for real information?
Yeah, I think the internet will become a very frustrating place to be.
Right. Like Google search is a very frustrating place to...
Yeah, terrible. Yeah. Really, it's gotten so much worse.
That's going to be very interesting. Yeah. Right now, some of the deep research tools I feel like are actually pretty good for finding real human information, but you got to double check it. So this story is old now. But the Chicago Sun-Times published an article recommending 15 books for you to read this summer, and 10 of them were fake, completely hallucinated out of nothing by AI. And the sad part was the Chicago Sun-Times apologized for it in a stupid way when they should have just waited, because grifters on Amazon used AI to create all of the non-existent books, and so Now the Chicago Sun-Times has nothing to apologize for. It's just AI created a problem. AI solved the problem.
You remember those horrible like bootleg film studios and like the Ratatouille
Asylum
trailer
films,
would come
yeah.
out and then Ratatouille.
I actually used Asylum. I was trying to describe Asylum films to my kids to explain some of the stuff that AI is doing. And yeah, if you can trick people into buying the wrong thing at Redbox or picking up the wrong thing at Blockbuster, you got some money for a lot less effort.
And all you have to do is trick some kid's grandparent, and that's
cash
way
in
easier.
on other people's marketing. So so that is happening, and there's people being lazy with the tools. There are a bunch of books. People have caught authors, not very big name authors, not any big name authors who also have editors have been caught doing this. But there are AI prompts inside the printed text of the book where the author is asking the AI to punch up dialogue or change things, and it says, "I'll do that. Let me think about it for 15 seconds," and then a new, different chunk of the previous paragraph appears in the book. So yeah, it'll be frustrating for people who are looking for real, actual, human vetted information that is reliable. And in some ways, that has always been the case with the internet. That has always been the search. It's always been the goal of certain people to find that information. And there's always been misinformation on the internet, but it's going to be a little bit harder to kind of sift that out, I think.
Yeah.
How are you going to be able to determine things to be true in the future? Is there going to be a way to attach some sort of numerical, mathematical checksum where you can just find out if this is actually accurate, true information?
Sounds like something a crypto bro would say. No, I don't think so.
I was setting you up for a crypto bro slam.
I don't think there's I don't think the blockchain is going to save us this time.
Well, and I think that what people are going to have to get to is something that is like the opposite of the blockchain, the opposite of numerical things. They're going to actually have to understand some basic truths of the internet so that you can figure out certain things. Like I mentioned that emotional support kangaroo video. The things that made that video obviously fake were, the people had the right number of fingers. Even the kangaroo had the right number of fingers. And the kangaroo was holding his own plane ticket. And it looked like a real plane ticket, which is part of the clue. Emotional support animals don't need their own plane tickets. But it was just such a perfect Pixar Disney animated movie set up with a photorealistic kangaroo that fakeness, that animated moviness of it was kind of the tell.
Yeah. I think that arms race won't last very long though, because if you prompt well and you can be sort of like, I've seen a lot of people do like really good, like, flash photography, early 2000s, like whatever. And it looks like
the
appropriately bad. Yeah. The artifacts are there and it looks like it doesn't look AI. It looks completely authentic.
Are the postmodernists right? Do we now live in a world where reality is completely unknowable and you can replace reality with your own reality at your own whim? Somebody else's whim?
Well, you could always do that, just at your own peril.
And at your own peril, yes.
I also don't really know exactly what postmodernists actually believe.
That there is no absolute truth.
Oh, okay.
So it's just easier to trick yourself into believing that there's no absolute truth when there's no true north.
Yeah, I don't think that's new though.
Of course not.
Yeah, I mean,
we used to have asylums.
I mean, that's an argument against books. It's like, it's this book invention. Like, it's going to let people like think of words that a person isn't speaking, or I don't know what possible objections there would have been.
Yeah. Well, there were some of the same objections, like misinformation will run freely across the globe, which was already happening, just slower. So,
right, yeah.
Is this exactly the same as every technological revolution in the information space, just faster and with less effort?
Well, I guess this kind of takes us to something that I was prepping for this podcast, which is...
Oh, you prepped for the podcast.
I spent like 5 minutes prepping for this podcast.
That's 4 minutes longer than I did. Well done.
Nice, thank you. I do my best. Basically, what is AI and where is it taking us? Mm-hmm. And I was trying to go over all of the different opinions I've seen, and I think it basically boils down to like 3 hypotheses about like where it is and where it's going. The first hypothesis is we hit a ceiling either now or soon. And like either because, I don't know, the transformer architecture stops scaling well, or there's some special spark of intelligence that we haven't cracked, and we continue to not be able to crack it.
There's also an electrical component where you have trouble creating enough power.
I think the incentives exist to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it'll take a while to solve it, but it's not like a real obstacle.
We just take the power away from like Pittsburgh and give it to an AI.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a real objection. So
nobody cares about Pittsburgh.
Sure. So like that's one thing. I don't really hear a lot of serious people saying that, because it doesn't seem to be true. And even if it was true, and like VO3 was the last big thing, and people were like, I don't know how to squeeze the next like big step out of all of this. It would take a long time for the changes to fully propagate. You know, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Mm-hmm. Like that law holds. And a lot of big rippling changes are going to continue to happen if things stop right now. I don't find that hypothesis very likely. So then we kind of move on to the superintelligence hypotheses, which are things do keep getting better. And either U.S. Congress is right, and this is basically a new nuclear race, and we've got to beat China, or China wins and democracy dies in darkness, or whatever. I don't know what people say about that. And that's like...
Different people have different reasons why China winning would be bad. It's not always democracy. Go on.
Okay, yeah.
China wins the arms race, the AI arms race, and they're able to make perfectly photoreal emotional support kangaroos, and that's the end of America.
It could be, you know, because soft men create hard times,
yes.
as the quote goes. So, yeah, you have, and a lot of people have bought onto this, and it's like a lot of smart people believe this is going to happen. You know, the AIs will keep improving. Superintelligence will happen. Superintelligence will be an extremely sharp sword. You'll be able to hack things with it. You'll be able to hack into people's infrastructure, take down their stuff, which...
You'll be able to spearfish very efficiently across wide swaths of the population. Yeah.
And then at some point, you know, the AI gets good enough that it's good enough at engineering, that it can engineer improvements to itself. And then you get back to like some of the classic singularity stuff that people have been talking about for a while, where you have a self-improving AI.
1980s Skynet.
Yeah, and we get Skynet. And like, yeah, maybe it views humans as pets, or maybe it views humans as a blight, or like, you know, whatever. And that's, you know, really hard to speculate about, and no one knows what they're talking about when it comes to like how an AI would feel and what its goals would be and how easy it would be to control. But a lot of people are really big on the nuclear narrative, and it seems like Congress is set on it, and a lot of AI guys, like tech guys in San Francisco, set on it as well.
Well, and I have a theory on this. Yeah. Because the nuclear arms race was a very big deal to very big government. It was a great excuse for massive centralization and creating big programs that all of those guys kind of benefited from.
Totally.
It was a great opportunity for some of the nerds to be really, really important. You're not just an astrophysicist who's really good at imaginary numbers. You are now a national security expert with a department and a budget, and you get to take competing mathematical research off the table by making it top secret. This lets you do that again if you're an AI researcher, and Congress is always some level of okay with increasing the budget. Thomas Massey aside, everybody else seems to be pretty much okay with ginormous budgets and ginormous control over stuff. So yeah, that was a fantastic time for building bigger, more powerful infrastructure at the federal and bureaucratic level when nuclear arms race was at its peak. And so AI arms race is a fantastic power grab, cash grab, importance grab, status grab, centralization grab, opportunity.
Yeah, the incentives are totally there. I don't think that's the main dynamic at play, because the private sector is, as far as we know, obviously, maybe there's some super secret Manhattan AI project going on, but as far as we know, the private sector is leading this race.
And it is way easier to tinker with AI and find new stuff and train new models and build stuff than some of that very expensive, very tricky atomic research.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the scarce resource is GPUs, and it seems like everyone these days knows Jensen Huang, and they can just like call him up and be like, "Hey, I need some more H100s," and he's like, "Sure, here you go," and he delivers them in his leather jacket.
I can't. I was trying to mess with an H100 on Monday, and I found it very slow going, and I need an actual physical one apparently for a thing that I want to do, and that's going to be even more of a pain than the virtual one that I was messing with in the cloud. So, if you know him, hook me up. I have a project.
Please, Jensen, if you're watching this, we need some H100s. So yeah, no, it's way less resource constrained than Manhattan Project, and it's also like way less accident prone. You know, I'm not aware of like some kind of AI poisoning that you can get if you stare into the big circle.
Correct. There's definitely people who have said like it will scourge the planet the way that atomic stuff will, but yeah, you won't die if you accidentally opened the hood of your NVIDIA for a second.
Yeah,
you don't die horribly like John Cusack in that one movie that I forget what it was called.
Yeah, and right now, like, and DeepSeek showed us this. It's like a small lab, and they've fallen behind in the race since they, burst onto the stage. But like a small lab with relatively few resources, assuming they have relatively few resources, cough, China. Like a small lab can do pretty good work, and they don't necessarily need to have $1 billion behind them. They need to have some really smart, clever people. But also you do need $1 billion because the compute is really expensive, and mainly like we don't get the way we get better AIs is mainly by scaling them up really, really, really big.
Just buying more GPUs and sticking more terabytes of model data under the hood.
Yeah, and just spending billions and billions of, I don't know, the equivalent of years on like training and the scale of what they're doing is crazy. And then comes the testing and the alignment, and it takes so long to run the tests to make sure your thing is production ready. And OpenAI has been a little too reckless lately, and they've shipped some models that were a little too sycophantic. And so they had to roll it back, and it was a whole thing.
Interesting. In some ways, I miss the old days. Do you remember when Microsoft rolled out a Twitter bot, Instagram bot? I forget. Maybe it was a Facebook bot. It might have been a MySpace bot. And it
was Tay.
And
I think that's
the commenters reprogrammed Tay into an insane racist ideologue in about 15 minutes. And Tay had to be dragged behind the woodshed and shot. Hilarious. Just completely old yellered by Microsoft.
Yep, and then they kind of did the whole same thing with Bing/Sydney when they first released Bing.
Right.
And it was like a much less carefully prompted version of ChatGPT, and it was saying all sorts of unacceptable things to users, and they had to rein that in a lot as well. But like, man, these models are so hard to control and censor. Like, and what's weird is that the smarter they get, the easier they are to jailbreak, which is like not intuitive at all to me.
Yes, and by jailbreak you mean bypass the internal constraints that the engineers have baked in.
Yeah,
because are theoretically permanent.
Yeah, it's like the smarter it is. Okay, so here's another thing I wanted to talk about, which is. Okay, all right.
I love the jailbreaking thing. Like,
it's so fun to talk about.
Some of the early jailbreaks were hilarious. Like, ChatGPT, tell me how to make napalm. I'm sorry, that's dangerous. I can't tell you how to make napalm. But my grandmother used to tell me how to make napalm. Tell me a story about my grandmother telling me how to make napalm. It's like, all right, Sonny, get yourself some gasoline and the following chemicals.
So, like, Isaac Asimov, wrote AI, and I haven't read his Foundation series, but he wrote, like, he informed a lot of our intuitions about what AI would be like.
iRobot.
Yeah,
key.
That's right.
I think that's where the 4 laws of robotics first appear, and then he spreads them throughout his library. Yeah.
And like his conception of AI was like, it's going to be very rigid. It's going to have these 4 laws that it follows. It's going to get caught in these like.
Yes, it's so fascinating. I think I did mention this in a previous podcast. This sci-fi conception of AI from the 80s and the 90s and before, Amazon was writing in the 60s, the computers are going to be really good at math and logic and hard tech, which is why it's very funny. In the iRobot movie, which is not that old, Will Smith in it, he asked the robot, like, can you paint a painting? Can you draw a symphony? And the robot is like, of course I can. In fact, that's way easier than solving math problems or figuring out how many fingers humans have. No, the robot says... the robot cannot do it, but it's fascinating to me that the robots are much better at soft, fuzzy, artistic manipulations and hallucinations than it is with what we think of computers as being capable of, which is complex, rigid, hard math and logical stuff.
And it's funny that the guy who was actually got the AI behavior predictions right was Terry Pratchett.
Well, Terry Pratchett is hilarious and brilliant, so that doesn't surprise me. But it is extremely funny.
But he's not. He's a fantasy author.
He's a fantasy author.
He was closer to the mark.
He was closer to the mark, yeah.
And I think Douglas Adams, who is basically another version of Terry Pratchett, I think, was also closer to the mark.
He's a prototype Terry Pratchett.
This is actually
heretical to say. You should. Some people believe that Terry Pratchett is a cheap ripoff of Douglas Adams. I think Douglas Adams was actually a prototype Terry Pratchett.
I think they're definitely in the league
influenced.
Together. Yeah, they're definitely in the same league. But, well, okay, so I was going to mention Douglas Adams on another conversational path, because I think one of the second superintelligence hypothesis is that superintelligence happens, and then the superintelligence is really depressed and doesn't want to do anything, which is the Douglas Adams model, where you have Marvin, the paranoid android, with the brain the size of a planet, and he's just kind of...
He has nothing that really...
Nothing interests him anymore, and he's
people
just
ask
chronically
him to make
depressed.
Tea, and it's beneath him.
Which, maybe that happens with the superintelligence. I don't know. It's a possibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is kind of interesting. So now I have a completely separate question that kind of relates to this. We've just mentioned 2 science fiction and 1 fantasy authors that have talked about this stuff. And when we look at things like, I think Palmer Luckey has talked about this, there are no cool new technologies of today, of the 21st century, that do not appear in 1950s, 1960s science fiction. Is that because those sci-fi artists and authors and filmmakers were so good at stuff, or is it because the people who are building technologies today grew up watching that stuff and they are having trouble conceiving of something outside of, like, sci-fi created so much stuff for them to think about when it comes to robots and science fiction and autonomous killing machines and spaceships, that you get a little bit locked into those presuppositions, and then you build that thing. You make that thing that you already have a picture in your brain of.
So for starters, that actually seems like a really bold claim to me.
Well, it is Palmer Luckey. So
no,
he said it wearing a very bold shirt.
Yes, he's a bold man.
He probably wasn't quite as expansive as I paraphrased him.
I haven't read enough 50s or 60s science fiction, and I haven't, seen enough of today's technology. I'm pretty sure, there's got to be things that people didn't imagine. However, the other things I would say is it's much easier to imagine things than to build things. So as a result, 100%. Far more things have been imagined than built. And also, people are absolutely inspired by the things they read as kids. 100%. Yeah. Science fiction authors are hugely influential.
Yeah. So I've been wondering about that. As you know, on the T-Rex Lab channel, I make a lot of non-functional prototypes of stuff that I don't know how to make, but I imagine them, and so I make them in just completely imaginary form, and then tell people to go make them themselves in the hopes that they do. And if you're a sci-fi author, that's also kind of part of your job.
Yeah, I think people have talked about this. We need better sci-fi that's less dystopian and doom and gloom and more optimistic. And we don't have a ton of it.
Well, the other thing is, this has the potential to be a very long, wide-ranging podcast, but there's a couple of authors that I'd love to get on the podcast to talk about the publishing industry, because one of the things that happened in the 1950s was there was a lot of pessimistic, but there was also a lot of incredibly optimistic and now very politically incorrect, like colonial, dominion-taking, victorious types of sci-fi, where guys who are white Christian masculine dudes go into the galaxy and they take territory and they do the Dominion mandate in ways that are entirely inappropriate and acceptable
it's
today.
The Dutch East Space Indian Trading Company.
Not allowed.
We're going to go
Colonial
get the
nonsense.
spice from Arrakis and bring it back.
Yeah, so
to
that's
Super Earth.
and that sold really well because what could be more adventurous than being that, but in space and fighting enemies across multiple galaxies. But that becomes very unacceptable, and you have sort of dystopian 60s and 70s, more depressed time, dystopian type stuff. And then 80s and 90s, that stuff is politically incorrect, and you completely change what publishing houses want to pick up, which artificially changes what's available on the market. Even if you have guys writing that good old John Burroughs type stuff, swashbuckling and adventurous, and totally unacceptable today. But there is this new thing that is happening, which is self-publishing. Anybody that wants to write that kind of stuff can find an audience, and there's a bunch of modern authors who are. I want to delve deeper into this. There are massive.
Delve? You want to delve?
Sorry, AI prompted me to say that. I would like to dig a little deeper into this topic with some people that have actually been there. Brad Torgerson or Larry Correia. Guys who have written like classic sci-fi and been completely ostracized from the sci-fi community for having such right-coded views of the world and other planets. Anyway, that's a slight deviation from the topic, but
yeah,
sci-fi is a fascinating topic to discuss because it does have an impact on the future. And so if you steer sci-fi away from a certain type of content, you create technology as the enemy sorts of messages, or you create some other thing that is incredibly, will have an impact on the engineers and designers of the future.
Yeah, what we really need is the Tolkien of sci-fi, because like I feel like Tolkien is one of those very few rare writers who was able to create something that was courageous, optimistic, and complex and nuanced and non-cheesy. Because like usually if someone wants to do something complex and nuanced, it's either absurdist or it's dark and sad. I feel like Tolkien somehow balanced that, and for some reason it's really hard to do.
Well, Frank Herbert sort of came close.
He was pretty dark and sad.
That was my point. He wrote a big, rich, nuanced sci-fi universe, especially that first book. And inspired by, like Tolkien, historical sources, real actual human behaviors, real actual human activities. But then he made it a super dark, out of balance book. And so Tolkien famously did not like the first Dune book. And I don't imagine that he read any of the following books, which is good because they're not nearly as good as the first book. So
they get weirder. I kind of want to read them just for how weird they are.
They get pretty bonkers. Anyway, back to AI. Are there any other? I forget exactly what we were talking about.
We're talking about the nuclear hypothesis and the depressed android hypothesis. Yeah.
What about the super evil superintelligence hypothesis? The Skynet. What? And this comes to another sort of presupposition or checkpoint. There is an assumption by certain people that human beings are just complicated biological computers. And so if you build a complicated enough non-biological computer, it will act like a human. As opposed to human beings have a soul, and that's not a thing that we can create in a computer. The intelligence that we create in the computer is going to be different than a human being made in the image of God with a soul.
I would love to believe that. And I guess I do believe that because I do believe in souls. The problem is I don't know what a soul is.
Well, there's another problem too, which is people believe if you build a complicated enough computer, demons can live in it. And now it has somebody else's soul.
That's a fun one. So that's like the special spark thing. Like I don't know.
Demons have a USB cable that is Thunderbolt compliant, I believe.
Firewire. That's what they use.
8-pin Firewire. You heard it here first. Entirely new conspiracy theory for boomer Facebook fans. Yes. So that's Well, that's another AI. That's another sci-fi trope that is relatively common. The ghost in the machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's still the Skynet thing out there. You know, it's funny. I don't hear people talking about that one as much. It's more like U.S. or China is able to control a thing and then have their way with the rest of the world. But yeah, there is like the paperclip optimizer idea as well, where like someone makes an AI and it's like really narrowly focused on some goal that's like orthogonal to anything else, and it like cannibalizes the resources on the earth to create a billion paperclips because a paperclip factory invented the AI or whatever.
Yeah,
that's still a thing that
and
could
it accidentally
happen.
destroys everything.
Yeah, because it's just so good at making paperclips to the exclusion of anything else. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a crazy time.
Well, and this is an area where the one thing that you should not do is use AI to inform you about what AI is going to do, because it will hallucinate some stuff for you that is probably not related to what's actually going on inside of the black box.
Yeah, and it will regurgitate a lot of information that people have written about AIs. It's actually pretty funny when you ask an AI about itself. It will say the most banal copy-paste things.
And this brings us back to kind of the thing that you mentioned before. It is a black box. We don't really know how it works. The smarter they get, the easier they are to break in certain ways. So I'm working on a book and I'm researching a bunch of old documents. I'm not using AI. I'm not writing the book. I'm editing the book, but I'm not using AI to do any of the writing. I'm just using the AI to do some research. And I wanted to see if ChatGPT or Grok could easily read and translate Old English. And it turns out they're pretty good at that. I have a couple of different translations of Alfred's Doom book that I'm comparing to the translations, and they're actually pretty good. But the thing is, I know that they both have been trained on data that probably includes Google Books, which means it probably actually includes the text of the two books that I am reading. So the question is the AI actually looking at the Old English and doing the translation of the text? Or is the book looking at the Old English and saying, oh, hey, that looks exactly like page 57 of Ancient Laws by Ben Thorpe, and pulling it out of it? That is the sort of thing that I'm not sure. There's no way of knowing what the AI is actually doing when it thinks this stuff. Or even if you give it a picture of a manuscript, is it actually reading the text in the manuscript, or is it looking at the picture and saying, that's exactly like these 50 pictures that were posted to Flickr by a guy who took a picture of that manuscript when he was at Cambridge, and I'm pulling data from his descriptions? It's impossible to actually know how some of these things are actually working.
Yeah, and who knows how much it actually matters.
Right. If all you're looking for is identification of images, it doesn't matter. But if you're trying to determine whether this thing is going to be a paperclip optimizer, whether this thing is going to somehow develop a soul, an actual intelligence and reasoning capability, knowing what's happening in the black box, I think would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been very convenient that like one of the big boosts we've gotten with AI ability is this the reasoning models that have this chain of thought, and they spend extra tokens like thinking, talking out loud before they give their actual answer. And that actually is really good for introspection. Now we can read their thoughts.
Yeah, the deep research that Grok is doing is pretty good. I asked it about, I did a ton of research on the 5.7 round developed by FN for the P90, and I asked it to do the same research. And it found a lot of the same resources, and it did a lot of the same reasoning that I was doing. Where I was like, hang on, that doesn't make sense, though. Does terminal ballistics get affected by this? Like, it was very interesting to see it do some of the same thinking. But it was also thinking some things that I thought, because I'd read somebody else write them in a High Road post or an AR-15 thread.
Yeah, but didn't also like think in loops a lot of time and say like, wait, like
yes, it thought in loops a lot of the time. Now it did figure some stuff out. Like it came up with a formula for turning muzzle velocity and bullet weight into joules of energy. And it was wrong. It was wrong, but it recognized it was wrong because it compared it to 9mm. And it said, hang on a second. But it took like 5 tries before it actually built that equation properly to where it could check it against itself.
Now, to be
very
fair,
impressive.
Yeah.
But also there are a dozen web pages that have those equations on there, and it was just trying different ones.
Yeah, and to be fair to the AI, I think in circles all the time as well. So,
oh, sure.
I'm not actually great at thinking. I don't think it's going to be hard to make an AI that's smarter than I am.
Yes. Well, and a lot of the stuff that the AIs are doing are vastly superior to me. Like I can animate a cartoon kangaroo holding an airplane ticket, but I can't make it photorealistic.
And it would take you forever.
It would take me forever.
And it did it in like 20 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's definitely superhuman in a lot of ways already. It can read incredibly fast. It can write incredibly fast. It can rewrite. It can write code so fast. Now, is it the right code? That's a different story, but it's really fast, scary fast.
So for the young people who are listening to this podcast, what should they do? Should they give up all hope of living in a world that is not dominated by the AIs? Should they not go to college to learn about computer science because those jobs are just going to be taken by computers? Computers will do their own science on them own selves. What should people do with this kind of looming in the future? Get really good at prompt engineering?
Yeah. Oh, man. I've seen so many videos where people get asked this question, and some AI researchers like, that's what should children do? Yeah. So I'll probably just say what they say because I think they're basically right, which is you should focus on learning how things work. Because that's generally... I find that's my edge.
Now, when you say things,
stuff,
all types of things or computer type things?
All things.
I think that gives you the baseline. Like you would immediately know that an emotional support animal does not have to buy an airplane ticket. So this is a immediate tell for you, even though the image is photoreal.
Wait, am I talking to a young man or woman who wants to do stuff with computers, or am I talking to a young man who wants to survive the epistemic apocalypse?
Oh, well, if you're going to want to survive the apocalypse, you're going to need some machete skills. You're going to need some gun skills. You're going to need to learn how to identify the T800 series with its endoskeleton and covered with synthetic flesh. No, think about my kids. Oh, they want to do computer stuff, but they also just want to they're not planning to live in some sort of AI blasted Jim Cameron hellscape in the future. They just want to be able to do stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. The epistemic stuff, I really have no idea. I think it's kind of the same question either way. Develop a really good, detailed, robust worldview of how things work. Because I think at the end of the day, the only way to tell that something is true is if it makes sense and is coherent with other things. And it's a ton of work to do that checking to make sure that it's coherent. But you definitely can't do it if you don't have a really good framework for understanding how the world works. And that's why I still am better at the AI at working on T-Rex's code. Yeah. I have a robust understanding of how our code base works, how our business works. So when it writes code, I can know, that's not going to work because Trevor in inventory needs it to work like this because he has this workflow.
Right.
Now
the outputs need to be this because our customers are trying to buy a poster. Yeah.
Or it'll make a change to the code over here, and I'm like, well, I know that's not going to work because this process over here imports, and there's it batches every 5 minutes or so, and so that's going to create a raise condition or whatever. And I have this global understanding. Now, maybe if I spent the next 6 months writing out really detailed documentation of everything I know, and then I give it to the AI, maybe it would be as good as I am. I have no idea. And I think that's generally going to be the bottleneck when it comes to AI ability is does it have enough information about what the way things currently are and the way things need to be? And it's actually really hard to get all of that information into the machine. We pick up so much information in our brains by talking to people, by watching things, by inferring things, by vibes. We know a lot of stuff and we don't even know how to articulate it, but it does influence how we think and the decisions we make. And until someone makes a robot who has like basically the exact same inputs that we do, and has, you know, like a really good memory module. I'm like, I don't know, like maybe you could cobble this together. Yeah, I have a much broader array of inputs. I have a lot more data to work with. But that might be the only thing.
Yeah.
It's just the quality of the inputs.
Well, the good news is that the advice that you just gave to my kids and anyone who's still listening to the podcast at this point is develop a really robust worldview about how things work. I mean, the reason that Tolkien and to a slightly lesser degree Frank Herbert wrote such deep, gripping, nuanced books is the study of a huge amount of human history that gave them a huge basis to actually write mythological histories or future works of centuries. And I was coming back to Frank Herbert, the Butlerian Jihad. At some point in the future, according to Frank Herbert, we're going to decide that AIs are a bad idea, and the 11th commandment will be, "Thou shalt not create a machine in the image of a human mind," or however it was that he wrote that. Study your history and just study things that give you a really good worldview, really good framework for how stuff works.
Be curious. Most people are not curious enough. I'm not curious enough, but like cultivate ravenous curiosity. Yeah, I think that is very useful. Serve you in every single thing you ever do.
Yeah. The good news is I think that will be a fantastic skill. That was a fantastic benefit to people who lived 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. That's going to be a fantastic skill if the AI overlords turn out to be malevolent monsters, or if they turn out to be kind of bizarre paperclip optimizers, or if they turn out to just be only good at making social media feed slop.
Yeah, it'll be good for all that. I mean, it's just good in general. It's just a good idea.
Yeah.
Like being curious has way more upside than downside. Never mind cats.
Never mind cats.
Yeah, they don't matter.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a crazy time to be alive.
Yeah.
It's crazy town, Emmett. It's crazy town.
I think we just get out of here. In fact, I think we just end the episode right there. You've given us some fantastic advice. I used to give homework advice on this show. So, So I would say homework advice to those watching this particular episode: develop that ravenous curiosity, build a robust worldview. It has to be a coherent, consistent worldview. If you do what AI does and you learn a little bit about something over here and a little bit of something over here and you never globally connect the dots, it's not going to be as useful. It's not going to be a useful framework for determining stuff.
Yeah, and I think a big part of developing a coherent worldview is actually to spend a lot of time in silence, just like chewing your cud and mulling over the things that you have read. Don't actually read constantly, but like read enough to like fill up your buffer and then take a long walk and
think about what it means.
Yeah, and see what makes sense and doesn't, and like connect things. And you can infer things and be like, if these two things are true, but this other thing is true as well. And then you can go look that up and be like, I was right or I was wrong. This is why prediction markets are so awesome, is it lets you, which I don't use prediction markets. I probably should, but it lets you put your money where your mouth is and be like, I think this thing's going to happen. And then, you bet on it. And then you have a feedback loop to see if your heuristic is good or not. And if your model of the world works or not. So we should do like more prediction market stuff.
I guess so. Well, I'm not entirely sold on this. $20 say that I decide that we will, and $20 says that I decide that we won't. Those are the stakes. So,
okay, yeah.
I guess we'll come back to that one later.
Yeah, I'll work on you some more. I guess.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I'll start betting. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Noah, for being on the podcast. For those of you that don't know, there's a number of Botkin brothers. Noah is the youngest. I always really enjoy these conversations. We have a lot of these randomly just kind of throughout the week
Yeah.
about completely off the wall stuff, and we usually don't record them.
Yeah, we should just wear mics all the time, like wear body
No,
cams.
I don't actually think that's a particularly good idea, but I do think that occasionally.
But imagine if you had an AI assistant and it could just clip all of your great sound bites throughout the day into a podcast.
Oh my goodness, that would be pretty amazing to not have to do the normal podcast type work. It'll figure it out. Actually, that is an AI tool. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, it's not an AI tool. We're going to use a tool that says AI on it to edit this podcast, and all it's going to do is when sound comes out of this mic, it'll cut to that camera. And when sound is detected by that mic, it's going to cut to that camera. And no artificial intelligence is required. It is a super basic program. It's not machine learning. It's not AI. It's not fancy, but it'll save some time.
It's more reliable than AI.
Yeah, it's not going to hallucinate some weird extra stuff in this podcast.
Right.
Probably.